But today we're going to be talking about a wonderful topic that I'm sure you're all interested in. It's a blue life color. It's obesity, or how to lose weight. Even those of us who look quite slim, we call them toffees. They're thin outside but fat inside. You have a lot of fat that is surrounding a lot of your organs, like your heart or your liver or your kidneys. You can't see it on the outside, but it's actually that fat that is called visceral fat that is very dangerous for us. So all of us need to try and get rid of as much of that fat as possible. And it's a strange old term, losing weight. You know, you can lose your keys, you can lose all sorts of things, but actually you can't lose weight. You have to actively do something to burn it off. It's not just going to be done by losing something in your body. It just doesn't happen that way. You have to actively do something to reverse it. And one of the questions I have to ask, this Western culture is fast becoming a global culture. And why is that? It's the Western diet, I call it. High fat, high sugar, high salt, high protein, low fiber, and low nutrients. Even in this country where we have lots of food, there are people who are malnourished just because they're not eating the right amount of nutrients in their normal diet. And this gentleman has something to add to where we are. You know him? Okay, I'm sure most of you know his products. He came up with McDonald's, right? So, and by the way, those of you who think, life is over at the age of 50, at the age of 55 is when he actually started McDonald's. And by the time he died, when he was 84, he left about $12 billion to the Salvation Army. So it was a good business for him, not great for the rest of us. Okay, those of us who take those products, we don't get a good deal, really. And I spend a lot of time going out and speaking in Africa. Not an awful lot of McDonald's in Nigeria, but I understand McDonald's is coming to Africa quite soon. And when it comes, people are going to be saying things like, oh yeah, I think it's all in the genes. It's not in the genes, it's in what we eat. It's in what we do, okay? Because actually, it's a big problem in the world. It's a huge problem. It's an epidemic. More people now are dying from overeating than undereating. You think of all the people that are dying from famines and starvation around the world. More people around the world are dying from eating too much than eating too little. And it's one of the interesting things in life. If you were to ask a scientist, what's the simplest way to live longer? The simplest way. I don't need to know about all the greens and all that. Just tell me, what simple thing must I do to live longer? That answer would be just to eat less calories. With all the experiments that are done in the world, they do it on rats all the time. If you restrict their diets, if they can't eat as many calories, they live longer. That is just the absolute truth. Just by restricting your calories, you prevent certain diseases like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, all of those things. But that's fine for me to say, but what is it about these things that makes the Western diet so attractive and so addictive? Well, I'd like to get the answers from the animal kingdom. A shark can smell one drop of blood from 1 kilometer away. Did you know that? So if you try and understand that, a kilometer away, you put a drop of blood here, very soon, a shark will be able to detect that. Now, why would it be able to do that? What's the point of that? Okay, let me help you along. Which is it easier to catch, a wounded fish or a fit fish? Easier to catch a wounded fish. A wounded fish is likely to leak a bit of blood somewhere. As soon as the shark smells that, it will say, you know what, I've got an easy fast food waiting for me over there. I don't even have to put out any energy. I can find it. If it's bleeding, I can kill it. That's why it's designed to be able to detect blood a kilometer away. Now, what has that got to do with weight loss? Well, all of us are like that shark. All of us want to save energy. We call this the motivational triad. Every single one of us wants to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and save energy. Every animal does that. Every animal wants to do that. So let's look at the motivational triad for food. We seek pleasure. Sugary food stimulates the pleasure centers in the brain. Now, some of us are quite addicted to sugary food, let's be honest. I mean, I'm one of them too. I have to say, I'm terrible. I treat sugar the same way alcoholics treat alcohol. So I try and avoid it because if I eat it, I can be eating it for days and, it doesn't do me too good. So, and the reason for it is because every time we take sugar in, it stimulates those pleasure centers in the brain. It's exactly the same as what happens when you take heroin. Exactly the same neurological pathways. That's why it can be so difficult to kick the habit of sugar. Avoid pain. Well, we don't like our blood sugar levels going down because it doesn't make us feel too good. We get grouchy. So try and avoid that by looking for sugary snacks. The best way to save energy is to eat foods that are rich in energy. And those foods are sweet foods and foods full of fat. So sugar and fat does us sort of actually helps us to feel good. And as I've said before, it stimulates pathways the same as heroin. But what else does sugar do? The reason why it leads to weight gain is, yes, sugar has lots of energy, and if you store energy, you store it as fat, but it also increases what we call the insulin resistance. If you have lots of sugar, every time you take sugar in, your insulin levels have to rise to deal with that amount of sugar. But insulin doesn't just deal with sugar, it actually causes your cells to grow and causes you to store more fat. Now, if you have a little cancerous cell in your body, and you have lots of insulin in your body, insulin will program that cancerous cell to grow. And all of us have some cancerous cells in our body. Okay, so if you have lots of insulin in your body, you're putting yourself at risk of cancer as well. Now, here's an experiment that they did a few years ago. They took some rats, they fed them with as much sugar as they wanted, and then they fed another group of rats with as much fat as they wanted. And what they found is that the rats with all the sugar and all the fat, they just ate as much as they wanted, then stopped. They didn't put on too much weight. The problem was, when they mixed the fat and the sugar, the rats were not able to stop themselves from eating that combination. So the mix of fat and sugar together does something in us that makes us lose our control over our appetite. And where do you find this combination? Obviously in all the things that we like: cakes, biscuits, ice cream, custard, chocolate. That has that 50-50 percentage of fat and sugar. And many of you will know that it's sometimes difficult to give up eating biscuits or to give up eating cakes. Oh, it's only me, is it? Okay, that's fine. No, I mean, I can confess, I am like that. I mean, I remember being months free of sugar. I just hadn't taken any sugar in for a long time. And my wife came into the kitchen and she put down a bag, and in that bag was a packet of biscuits. And she went up, had a shower, came back down. By the time she came down, I'd finished that packet of biscuits. And obviously, being the wonderful man that I am, I said to her, "Look what you made me do. You know, it's your fault, it's not my fault." But the reason why this food is so addictive is because it has this combination of sugar and fat. It's very desirable to us. But so how are you going to avoid, how are you going to overcome this temptation? Well, thankfully, I've come up with a lovely solution for you. It's called the Dr. Chidi Method. Okay, let's take it back. It's called the Dr. Chidi Method. Ah, no. Anyway, we'll leave it like that. But how do you do it? What you do, you see that cake, you see that donut, you see that whatever, that piece of chocolate. The worst thing you can say to yourself is, "I can't eat the donut." If you say that, you're going to want it even more. So the best thing you should say is, "Okay, I'll eat the donut, but I'll eat it in half an hour." If you do that and at the same time eat an apple, your blood sugar will slowly rise throughout that half an hour, so that after half an hour you'll have enough sugar in your bloodstream to overcome the desire for the donut. So that's why we say, don't resist it, choose to have it, but delay it. That is the Dr. Chidi Method. It works. Now, at the end of it, you may find that, you know what, after half an hour, I still want the donut. So do this technique again. Eat another apple. Maybe at the end of the day, you've eaten 5 apples. That's not bad for you, is it? That's pretty good. That's your 5 a day. You're done. Okay? So these are some superficial ways to overcome your desire. Here's another one. Okay, let me see with a vote of your hands. So let's say I've given you 2 minutes to eat 5 apples. 2 minutes to eat 5. You've got to eat them really quickly. Which apples would you rather have? Would you rather do it with Golden Delicious, or would you rather do it with Granny Smith's apples? So let me see the hands of Golden Delicious. Let me see the hands of Granny Smith. Cool, you're pretty weird up here, man. Most people would say Golden Delicious. And they would say Golden Delicious because, you know, the sour Granny Smiths are quite difficult to get down. Okay? That's what most people would do. What about this then? I want you to eat a big bar of chocolate in 1 minute. Who would do that with dark chocolate? Let me see your hands. And who would be able to do that with milk chocolate? Let me see your hands. Okay, you're a bit normal now. So most people would choose milk chocolate because it's nice and sweet. Dark chocolate is quite bitter. And what we find is, I say that the bitter is better and sour has power just because If you eat something bitter or if you eat something sour, it suppresses your appetite. It makes it more difficult to keep on eating all the chocolate and custard and biscuits. So if you find yourself in one of those binges, I hope you never do, but if you find yourself in one of those binges and you can't stop, reach for something sour or reach for something bitter. It will put a stop on your desire for sweet things. And if you're able to do that, if you keep on changing your diet and eating the right things, you will find that your taste buds will actually change and your taste will change with it. Now, often people say to me, oh, doctor, you see, I've no idea how I got to be 35 stone. I've no idea. You know, I only eat one lettuce leaf a day. I only drink the purest water. I exercise every day. For me, you see, obesity is simple. Anybody do physics here? Physics? Great, physics. It's really quite simple. The fundamental law of thermodynamics says this: matter or energy cannot be created or destroyed. Okay? Actually, this puts paid to the idea of the Big Bang, because how can everything come out of nothing? But that's a different argument. But matter or energy cannot be created or destroyed, so it's impossible to gain weight unless you are eating that weight. You can't just, magically gain fat. It doesn't happen. You have to have taken it in some way. Okay? And it's simple. Losing weight or gaining weight is just about eating. Thank you. It's just about eating more energy than you burn up. And I'll tell you this, it is very difficult to burn off a bad diet. For example, if you have a Big Mac meal, in order to burn out all of those calories, you would have to run, almost sprint, for 5 hours. None of us can do that. That's one Big Mac meal. So it's very difficult to exercise away a bad diet. Exercise is very important, but what you put in your mouth is even more important. I always say that it's about 80% what you eat, 20% how much you exercise. And often people say to me, well, how can this be true? I eat the same as when I was a teenager. And this is why it's very important that I'm talking to you now. It's very important because I talk about this concept of the middle years. You see, you are approaching your middle years. You're not there yet. But I always say, between the ages of 25 and 55, something happens to our bodies. Our middles increase. That's why I call it the middle years as well. And let me explain why this happens. I'll take you back to when I was a doctor, a junior doctor, newly qualified. I worked for the professor of surgery, and everything had to be done yesterday. Everything was urgent. So you find yourself running throughout the hospital all day. You're so busy that you never even get an opportunity to even go to the toilet. It was awful. I don't know if there are any junior doctors here, but junior doctors now have it a lot easier. When I was a junior doctor, if you were on at the weekend, you would work the whole of Friday, then you'd work Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, then you're back at work on Monday. Sometimes you never get a time to sleep. So in those days, I was burning off loads of calories. But then what happens, you go up the ladder a little bit and they give you another junior doctor to run around for you, and you've got this office. Now, if you're still eating the same, you are not going to be burning off those calories. Okay, so this is the period where you get your driving license, and once you get your driving license, you never have to walk again, right? So you continue just to burn off less calories. And that's why our middles start to increase slowly until one day you say, what's happening to my trousers? Are these shrinking or something? It's not the trousers, it's you. Sometimes we try to blame other things, but it's actually us. I want to talk to you also about one topic that is relevant to weight loss too. So if we have the video sound up. Disgusting. You mean you've never done this? No? Or you don't want to admit to it? You don't do it? No? None of you at the moment take your mother's breast milk? Okay, I'm just checking. There was a lady in London. I think she's still doing it, by the way. She is producing ice cream from her own breast milk. Have you ever tried that? And you're screwing up your face. How can you possibly do that? But my question is this: how come that you screw your face up to human breast milk, but it's okay having cow's milk? How can that be right? That's a different species, right? So we can't take milk from the same species because that's disgusting. Taking it from a cow, that's all right. How have we got to this stage where it's all right to drink milk from a cow? No animal in the wild drinks milk from another animal. No animal in the wild drinks milk into adulthood. There is a reason for that. That is why they don't worry about obesity and cancer and diabetes and all of those things. All of these things that cow's milk predisposes you to. You see, cow's milk is designed to make a little calf into a big cow very quickly. And when we take that cow's milk, it is very difficult for us to lose weight. Very difficult. And I've just been talking to the other group about how cow's milk actually predisposes you to all sorts of other things. Cancer. You know, the proteins in cow's milk can predispose you to cancer. It causes autoimmune problems. That's things like MS, lupus, type 1 diabetes, all of those things, thyroid disease. So it is something really to be avoided. I try not to be negative about anything, but I find it difficult to be positive about cow's milk. All right, so what can we do to reverse obesity? What can we do to lose weight? So let's start looking at our diet. One of the most important things you have to do, I think the most important thing, as well as giving up milk and everything, is obviously avoid alcohol. Alcohol is full of calories, by the way. You know, a glass of wine that everybody likes to talk about, a glass of wine has about 250 calories. A can of Coke has about 150 calories. So, you know, wine is very, very concentrated when it comes to calories. Avoid alcohol and any sweet drinks, and I mean any sweet drinks, that, you know, juices, anything like that. They are concentrated sugar. I often have a hierarchy of drinks. The best drink you can ever have is water. If you really desperately want something sweet, then have something like a smoothie because it's got all the fiber in it. Below that, you can have those freshly squeezed juices that you can do at home. Okay, I don't recommend them, but if you're going to have something like that, it's better than what's just below it, the juices you buy in the shop. Then you have the other sweet drinks, the fizzy drinks. And I think tied at the bottom is probably alcohol and the artificial sweet drinks. The artificial sweet drinks are absolutely lethal. Okay, the artificial sweet drinks, you know, like zero Coke and 1 Cal and all that stuff, they cause cancer, especially in young men, blood cancer in young men. They cause strokes in young women. They cause brain tumors in babies. You might ask yourself, if this is true, how come it's being sold to us? And I'd invite you to look up the history of aspartame and how much money was paid to the American government so that they could get this product on the market. It's absolutely lethal. And above everything, it helps you to put weight on. Nobody who takes these drinks, which are no calories, loses weight. All the evidence shows us that if you keep drinking those drinks, because your body is expecting more sugar, it increases your appetite for more sugar. So you'll eat more sugar and you'll eat more calories because you're drinking those drinks. Everyone puts weight on when they drink those drinks. So avoid them like the plague. So avoid all sweet drinks. And the reason why I say sweet drinks, it's when you're trying to lose weight, it's more important to avoid things like grape juice than it is to avoid a donut. Grape juice would do you more damage than a donut simply because the grape juice goes straight into your bloodstream. If it goes straight into your bloodstream, your insulin levels will spike, and that will make you retain more weight. It will help you to build more fat, and that's the last thing you want to do. At least a donut, you have to digest it a little bit before it goes into your bloodstream. So avoid all sweet drinks. I personally just drink water. I met a doctor in a conference last year. He said he's only drank water for the last 40 years, and he looked fantastic. He's in his 70s. He looked amazing. Does you a lot of good. So next thing to do is to replace energy-dense food, such as those chocolates and biscuits and cakes and all that, with energy-light food, fruits, vegetables, whole grains. So it doesn't mean you have to starve yourself. Actually, with that kind of food, you can eat as much as you like because it will fill you up and you'll end up still weighing less. Eat more, weigh less. That's the idea. Exercise every single day. You know, somebody said to me the other day, oh yes, I bought myself a dog so I can exercise. I said, that's a very good idea. Obviously, this is in America. Sorry to any Americans in the room. But if you're going to walk your dog, make sure you go out and walk your dog. You know, people buy dogs and they get other people to walk the dog for them. It's not quite as good, you know, but most of us are still trying to save energy. Even if you're trying to go to the gym, you look at this. These people are off to the gym. They're taking the escalator. They're not taking the stairs. How does that make any sense? I saw a fight break out outside a gym once, and that's because some person parked right in front of the entrance to the gym, and another person wanted to park there, and they were fighting over it. They're in a gym. They come to exercise. They can't even walk the length of a car park. You know, what is going on? We're always trying to save energy, that motivational triad that we talked about before. And then FITS is a very important acronym, so it stands for frequency, intensity, time, and stretching. Frequency is 7 days a week. Intensity Well, hopefully none of you have high blood pressure, but if you do have high blood pressure, you shouldn't do anything incredibly strenuous. You shouldn't do weight training or high intensity training or sprinting. You should just do brisk walking. Walking is the best exercise. I'd also say this, as well as walking, there's even other things you can do. Simply by standing more, you burn more fuel. By standing, you will burn twice the amount of fuel as you are sitting. So I always say, look, at home I have my own desk, and it's one of those desks that raises up, so when I'm writing, I write when I'm standing. It has been shown that if you stand for 6 hours a day, rather than sit for 6 hours a day, at the end of the year you would have burnt up the equivalent amount of fuel as if you would have run 25 marathons in 1 year. Anybody run a marathon yet? No one's, okay. Anyone done 2 in 1 year? Imagine doing 25 in 1 year. Imagine all the calories you would have burnt. Just by standing 6 hours a day, you would have burnt the equivalent after 1 year. So that's probably the easiest thing you can do. I like to make things easy for people if they want to lose weight. So you don't even have to go out of your house, you just have to stand a little bit more. Now, I always have standing meetings in my office. It makes the meetings a lot shorter, I have to say. But as much standing as you can do. Sometimes if you're watching a television show, why not try it standing? And you know, standing whilst you're writing, you might think that might be a bit uncomfortable, but you get used to it. I find it's very difficult for me to sit and work now. And it's almost impossible to stand and write and get this writer's block. You know, your mind is a lot clearer. You know Winston Churchill, right? Winston Churchill, he wrote his Nobel Prize-winning novel while standing. Now, I know he didn't look very fit. He did lots of other things that were not good for you. But it's just an example of how it keeps your mind clear. You ever heard of The Sound of Music, the film? So that musical was written by Oscar Hammerstein whilst he was standing. And if you ever heard of the Nobel Prize winner Ernest Hemingway, wrote most of his novels whilst he was standing. So there's something about standing that keeps your mind clear, as well as helping you to burn up all this fuel. At least 60 minutes a day of exercise. I mean, everybody's got these new gadgets now. I've got myself one of those Apple Watches, and it shows me every time I'm walking or standing or whatever. Very good devices, or Fitbit is another one. But do it at least for 60 minutes a day. Incorporate it into your day. Yeah, you don't have to say I'm going to the gym, but if you're going to college or if you're going to work, how can I incorporate a walk rather than driving or rather than getting the bus all the way? Very important. And try not to forget to stretch twice a day. It helps to prevent injury. Now, if you do all of those things, you can actually lose weight. It can take time, and I always say, look, if you're trying to lose weight, don't try and lose it quickly. Do it slowly. That's why I called it if you're trying to lose weight. The quick fixes do not work. If anybody who says to you, well, I can help you lose weight in weeks, you may lose weight in weeks. But actually, when you come back to it, you'll probably gain that weight again with about 10% more. There are many ways to lose weight quickly. I mean, I was sick for the first time in my life a month ago. I had diarrhea and vomiting. I must have eaten something really bad. And I lost 10 kilos in a week. I would not advise that for anybody. There are many ways to lose weight. But the best way to lose weight is to have a holistic lifestyle approach.